Hello, my name is Adrian Goldberg and welcome to Byline Radio, or if you're listening on catch-up, to the Byline Times podcast from the Byline Times. It's what the papers don't say, what radio doesn't report and what telly doesn't tell you. This time, the latest from Ukraine with Zarina Zabrisky reporting live from Odessa. She has seen the horrors of Mykolayiv, a city on the front line of the conflict, and she brings too a story of hope and defiance from Snake Island. First, though, just a reminder that Byline Radio and the Byline Times podcast are funded by subscribers to the Byline Times, our wonderful monthly newspaper. We can report without fear or favour because we don't have to dance to the tune of a wealthy proprietor. Our funding comes from ordinary readers taking out subscriptions to the Byline Times. So please subscribe if you can. You'll find details of how to subscribe at bylinetimes.com. That's at bylinetimes.com, our news-breaking website. If you've already taken out a subscription, thank you very much indeed. So let's hear now from Zarina. Hello, Zarina. We're recording this or going live on Byline Radio, depending on when you're listening to it, in the evening. And it's quite late at night where you are in Odessa. So just tell me the current situation, please.
Yes, Adrian, thanks for having us again, and thanks for giving airtime for Ukraine. It's really important now. I know that it's summer and there's a lot going on, and the attention is not as much focused on the war anymore. But since I'm here and reporting from here, I can tell you that this attention is really needed and a lot is going on. And the situation, while I'm being an optimist, or I heard today a realistic optimist, is rather rough. And today I'm going to be bringing you news from Odessa and the Black Sea and Snake Island, which is about 50 kilometers from here in the sea, and also from Mykolayiv, which is about 160 kilometers from here. It takes about an hour and a half to get there by car, and that city right now is being pummeled by the Russian artillery. And I just went there for an interview with the advisor of the governor, who's also the governor there is the head of the military administration. So this person is pretty high up. And it was quite a dramatic visit. So I'm going to tell you about that if you will.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And just so people can get a sense of this, people in the UK and the United States will have heard of the city of Kherson, written Kherson, but it's pronounced Kherson, I think, which is a part of Ukraine that is now occupied by Russia. So Mykolayiv is, I guess, next door, and therefore the next big piece of ground, the next city of significant size that Russia is seeking to occupy.
That is true. That is correct. That's a good point. Let me just give you guys a breakdown. Let's imagine that we're looking at the map. And we are looking at the very south of Ukraine. And that's where we here have the border with the Black Sea. And of course, it's always strategically important to have access to the sea. And for that, Russia is very eager to fight. And about 2 months ago, one Russian general whose name I do not remember because he wasn't very significant and kind of disappeared after this announcement, but nevertheless made a fairly important announcement that the plan, the long-term plan for Russia, the strategy, is to capture, seize the southern territories of Ukraine, and that would include Kherson, which is currently under temporary occupation, Mykolayiv, which is still standing after 127 days of this war of aggression, Odessa, which is standing very, very strong, and then on all the way to Moldova and to the territory which is currently a breakaway state not recognized by any countries, called Transnistria or Pridnestrovia in Russian, and which is very much under the Russian influence, and I wanted to say under Soviet influence because it looks like a little colony and flashback from the Soviet Union. So by capturing all these territories, Russia plans to first announce it a separatist state, kind of what they did with Luhansk and Donetsk People Republic. So that would be a Kherson People's Republic or Tavricheskaya area, which is going all the way back to the Russian Empire. And there are several schemes like this. And basically, eventually, this whole area in Putin's mind, going back to Russia and forming the Russian Empire, just as it used to be, or the Soviet Union. So that's the plan, and that's why Mykolayiv, which is about 60 kilometers from temporarily occupied Kherson, becomes a very important strategic point. As of now, the Ukrainian army is not just fighting back, but reportedly taking some steps to start a counteroffensive. And since I'm writing daily reports for Euromaidan Press, I kind of follow up the situation, and I can tell you that this is not confirmed even by all Ukrainian military authorities. So some would say that counteroffensive is already happening, and the others are saying that we're just standing strong and that basically more artillery, heavy weapons from the West are needed before the counteroffensive can take place. So one thing is clear, that Mykolayiv is standing. The Russians cannot enter it. And because of that, they are firing at the city and the Mykolyayiv Oblast. And Oblast is the region. It's the Ukrainian word for the region. So basically, it's the area around the city. So they are firing and launching the missiles, as they call it, the high precision weapons, which they are not, because they are constantly hitting the residential areas, and they are. There are reports of destroyed buildings that are just residences every day. Just today, there was a 5-story building destroyed. 3 stories, 3 floors were destroyed. And as of now, I believe there are 7 people, or I should say bodies found. And not to go into details, but they are using cluster munition, and that is particularly destructive. So sometimes it's not that the whole body is being found. The rescuers have to look for the fragments of the bodies.
Pretty grisly stuff. And in the view of the Ukrainian authorities, what the people of Mykolayiv have been subjected to at the moment, and my understanding, there's still nearly 250,000 people in the city, 230,000 people.
That's correct.
That what they're being subjected to is effectively a terrorist attack, that this is the site of a war crime with innocent civilians being remorselessly targeted.
Yes, and, to a certain extent, words do not really deliver the real situation, because when I was there just exactly a week ago on the 22nd of June, we started by having an interview in some open space, and I'm actually not at the liberty to reveal any geographic locations, because the military authorities, they are constantly under threat and they have to move around so they are not being hit by the Russians. So it was quite hard to get an interview, and we were moving around, And the Olga Malarchuk, who is just this incredible young woman, a military spokesperson and advisor to Vitaly Kim, the head of the military administration, telling me, opening up and telling about her family and the horror of the first days of the war. And I'm just asking her, how is it now? Because, I've heard a lot from other people I interview about the first days of the war, and it's important, but I want to know, how is it feeling now? Because I read that yesterday Mykolayiv was being shelled, and as I close my mouth, literally at this point, there's this boom, boom, like thud. And I have it on the audio that I'm recording all my interviews to then write them down. So I have it. I've listened to it many times. And not only you hear it, the bench is jumping up, the whole air is moving, everything is vibrating. And she's very calm, and she goes, yes, that's what happens. That's our daily life. Let's get to the bomb shelter. And I can tell you that in Odessa, people are kind of silly, me included. We're not going to bomb shelters. There's a lot of explosions, but we are not targeted as heavily here in Odessa. And I guess it's the human nature and also the Odessa spirit. I can tell you it's not a good thing, but there in Mykolyayiv, it was pretty straightforward. We have to go to the bomb shelter, which we did. And then, of course, I had a great long interview, because when you're, a person you interview, you would understand, Adrian, like as a journalist, right? She has she can't escape my questions. She's right there in the bomb shelter. So
nowhere to hide, no. But I mean,
No.
it is, and you've obviously experienced that now firsthand. The assault on Mykolyayiv, and it is almost a siege of the city. Really, is intense, and for the reason that you've explained, it is so strategically important because Russia wants to build this band across Ukraine, a band of territory, which it hopes it will be able to then declare effectively as part of Russia and part of this creation of this Eurasian empire that Putin has previously spoken about.
Yes, that is correct. And also we have to keep in mind that there's a certain strategy that the Russians use it when they are at war. They use it in Chechnya, they use it in Syria, and they are now using it here. We saw it in Mariupol. We're seeing it now in Donbass, in Severodonetsk, and now in Lysychansk, when they are just erasing the cities from the face of earth, and all that is left are those ruins of what used to be buildings. And that's one of my strongest impression there, when finally, after 7 missiles were fired and it was done, and the air raid is done, and so after 2 hours in the bomb shelter, we step out and we drive to the ruin of the building that the most of the world has seen, because it has this arch inside. There's this hole inside of the building. It was hit on March 29th. And when you are there, rather than looking at it at the picture, you just feel it in your bones and in your skin. And not only we looked at it, I think because she was just 2 minutes late, and she was running some errands, and she wasn't at her office on the 4th floor when the missile hit. And that's where her colleagues and friends have perished. And so she's drawn to it. And she took me and my fixer, my friend Natalia, up, and we went, and here during the war in Ukraine, there, certain safety precautions like they would be in America or probably in the UK. They do not apply. So you don't wear a safety helmet or anything. You just walk up in this ruin, and it was a very windy day, so everything is moving. These wires are moving, and there are maps, like a paper map on the floor that is making this sound like everything is alive. but also very dead. I wrote about it in the article, how all the little objects that usually make a lot of sense and that we don't even notice, like cups or forks or a bottle of perfume, a scarf, they all taken out of context. It's like Roland Barthes, mythologists. They lose their meanings. They become something else, and that feeling, I'm still trying to grasp it and to mentally or emotionally work through that. This is something that goes into your gut and stays there.
Wow, it's a really vivid and deep exploration of what it's like to be there, Zarina, and I really thank you for sharing that with us, because I'm getting chills as I'm listening to that, and admire your courage and bravery in being there, and that of everybody else is there. Some people like you choosing to be there in order to tell the truth of the people being there, because it's their home, it's where they live, and they don't want to leave because that's their little piece of land. There is a more upbeat story to tell, I think, about Snake Island, and people remember right at the start of the war where it's a little offshoot, isn't it? A little scrap of land, which strategically is quite important. And as the Russian submarine approached, if my memory is correct, Zarina, help me out if I'm wrong, the Russians called on some Ukrainian soldiers there to give up, and the Ukrainian soldiers delivered an expletive to the Russian ships that were coming in and told them basically to F off. And it was thought that the Ukrainian soldiers had died. It turns out they hadn't died, but Ukraine now has managed to somehow regain control of Snake Island.
Yes, and this would be a good transition from our Mykolayiv story and report to move into the sea, to the Black Sea, because what Olga said in her interview, and what was really important, that Ukraine is standing strong and Ukrainian soldiers know how to fight, but they can't fight without weapons, and they can't fight without heavy artillery. And the request is for more weapons. They will protect, she said, Europe and the world from this evil force, but they cannot do it without the weapons. And clearly what happened with the Snake Island, transitioning back to our good story now, is on having received some of the weapons, of which is not a good idea to share. You can find them in some sources, but as I just interviewed Ben Hodges, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who was the U.S. commander for the whole U.S. Army in Europe, and he started with a statement that we are not supposed to know, as the general public, how many howitzers or how many heavy artillery pieces went to help Ukraine on a certain part of the front. So we do, I'm not going to go into these details, but having received what they needed, let's put it this way, Ukrainians were able to get the Russians the hell off the island. And I can tell you so many stories about it. I'll have to really curb it, but let me try. First of all, I witnessed it. I live in an amazing location. I'm 15 minutes from the sea and 15 minutes from downtown. So by the time I'm done with my daily reports, which I do for Euromaidan Press, you could see daily information of the most important things that happened on Euromaidan Press. So by the time I'm done and I do some other articles, my brain is fried and I just need to take a break. So I walk to the sea and to my beloved Langeron beach. And the other day on Sunday, when I was writing an article about Mykolayiv, our Ukrainian air defense hit the missile right over my head. And I can tell you, Adrian, it was so loud. It was just unbelievable. Like everything, like all the walls, it was much louder than the explosions in Mykolayiv because it was right above our heads. And the funny thing that everybody just goes back to where they were. I was sitting at a cafe with my computer working. I went back and everybody else just went back, like we kind of paid for the food. Let's just get back to it. That's the, famous or infamous Ukrainian and Odessa spirit, like we don't give an F, as you say, like you can't scare us. We're just eating the ice cream here. And so yesterday I did the same. I went for a walk along the beach and I saw some people actually tweeted about it. You could see it. There are some crazy people who are swimming in the sea, and this is prohibited. And it's really not smart because it's full of mines. And from time to time, we hear the reports of people exploding on the mines just from going to the beach. But I saw 6 people swimming or sitting on the beach. And as they were swimming, I heard this very deep vibrations. Like it's like a sea monster is there. And everybody else who was walking around with their dogs and children, we all heard it. And what it was, that was this operation of liberating the Snake Island.
The Russians claimed that their withdrawal was a goodwill gesture, so that a grain corridor could be opened, but the Ukrainian government is saying clearly they forced the Russians out of there because Snake Island is just off Odessa and it is really strategically important. Again, part of this area that you're describing that Russia hopes to build across the southern part of Ukraine, from Transnistria and Moldova across then going towards Mykolayiv and Kherson and so on. So joining up this belt towards eastern Ukraine. So holding Snake Island is really a key part of maintaining that, all the links in that chain. So getting it back is a really big deal for Ukraine.
It's so big, Adrian. On so many levels too, strategically, because the Russians had their air defense, and without that, they wouldn't be able to protect their ships. So that undermines their position of their fleet in the Black Sea. And tomorrow I will share the interview with Ben Hodges, and he actually gives a really good analysis of the Russian incapability of their amphibious forces of the fleet. So that's really interesting. So, and they're losing, now they have even less potential there. And it's also, morale is so important in the war. If you listen to any military experts, everything is about the morale, because you can have great logistics and great equipment, but if your troops, if your forces, personnel are demoralized, you wouldn't be getting very far. And this is a big blow on the Russian Federation Army morale, because Snake Island was one of the first objects that they captured. Then there was this phrase coined, which is the motto of the Ukrainian resistance. The Russian military ship, go F yourself. And also there are a lot of mythological connotation. It's an ancient island. It's according to legends, if you look it up, some people have it that it was Achilles' tomb, that he was buried there. And it's mentioned by Plinius the Elder and in a bunch of historical texts. And according to one of the really nasty ideologists of the modern Russia, Alexander Dugin, the Apollo's temple was there. And whoever, literally it's a quote from Dugin, whoever has the Snake Island rules the world. So it's
That's
big blow. And I hope so too. There's one other time I'll tell you this legend about Poseidon and the whole Neptune relationship and this whole is kind of an interesting story. I don't think we have time today, but some other time I'll tell you. And it's fascinating.
You tease, Zarina. Before we close, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, I'm incredibly grateful for the time you've given us and the very vivid way in which you've given us a sense of the war in which you are in the midst. I just want to get a word with Mordecai, who's joining us from the United States, a regular listener to Byline Radio. And Mordecai, thank you for asking to join the conversation. Did you want to say something to Zarina?
Yes. Hi, Zarina.
Hi.
I'm wondering that the people of Ukraine, some in the area where things are good, some in the area where things are bad, do they grasp and go to and listen to President Zelensky more than their actual personal experiences? Which one affects them more? What do they listen to more in order for their own personal feelings, in order for their own personal safety?
It's a very good question. I think it's a combination from what I've seen, and I interview a lot of people, and I meet a lot of Ukrainian people on a daily basis, and I talk and ask them about everything, including the way they feel about their president. And I can tell you that, of course, what you hear is true. The support for Zelensky is overwhelming. I met a few people, maybe 1% of people I personally talked to, who had funny conspiracy theories. And I think we have mentioned them here with Adrian before, and that included Zelensky working for Putin, Putin working for Zelensky, Biden working for Putin. So there is like a healthy dose of conspiracy, but that's really rare. What really is common is seeing Zelensky as a leader. And this is what is really important. He delivers his nightly speeches, sometimes in the morning and at night, and people really listen to him. Ukrainians are very skeptical about their authorities. These are not Russians or some other nationalities who would, adore or idolize their leaders. That is not the case. But they certainly respect him, and he certainly does a great job providing inspiration and hope and explanations where they are needed. So overall, it's very positive. And I think people, first of all, of course, go to their own feelings and experiences, then to their local elected officials, and they also listen to Zelensky. That's my impression.
That's great stuff. Thank you, Mordecai. Zarina, before you go, just tell us the situation now then in Odessa, where you are, clearly under less threat generally than Mykolayiv, but still a city where air raids and occasional strikes are a part of daily life now.
Yeah, I mean, today we had only 3 or 4 air raids, which feels like a holiday and a weekend, because the previous many days, it was like all the time. You don't even know if it's an air raid or not. Like, you don't know when one stopped and another started. And sometimes you hear them, and sometimes you close the window and you don't. But sometimes when the church bells start to ring and the siren starts howling, it could really, it's annoying. It's, like when you're in New York and the fire engine is going, or the police or ambulance, it's like, ooh, that's like this all the time. So, and then also, of course, the explosions, which happen several times a day, and sometimes they happen, and it's not like you always know what happened. A lot of times it's confidential, or there could be training, or there is some infrastructure objects that is not okay to share with the general public. So you hear something very close and like your walls are vibrating, but you never find out what it was, and seemingly it's okay, and sometimes it's not okay. Like especially in Odessa region, there were people injured, including children, and but the spirit and morale are great. People outside, they're trying to look great. There's cultural life is, oh my God, if I wanted to go to all the exhibits and theater shows that are happening, I would never have time to speak to you or write articles or do anything else.
Well, listen, Zarina, it is great to speak to you again and hear you in such upbeat mood, considering everything that you've experienced. I would recommend people as well check out the previous podcast we did where you described a wonderful night at the opera, a night at the theatre, including opera and ballet in Odessa, such as the defiance and the spirit of the people of that city. Really appreciate your time. And you can follow Zarina on Twitter at Zarina Zabrisky. You can read her reports in the Euromaidan News as well. I'm Adrian Goldberg. This has been Byline Radio, or on Catch Up, the Byline Times podcast, funded by subscriptions to the Byline Times. That's our brilliant monthly newspaper. Do take out a subscription if you can, because it helps to fund Byline Radio and the Byline Times podcast, as well as the brilliant newspaper. Check it out at bylinetimes.com. That's where you'll find details of how to subscribe at bylinetimes.com. Reporting without fear or favour. Thanks very much indeed for listening. We'll see you all again very soon. Thank you and good night. Cheers, Zarina.
Bye.